Hi everyone. Okay, so this is the second part of my top 30 list of best movie franchises. So we're doing 20 to 11. There goes my maths. Um, and yeah, that's all we'll do today, and then I'll do the final 10 in another video. All right. Okay, so number 21 was Jaws, which I talked about in the last video, and I should remind you again, you know, some of the films are out of order in terms of their standalone films, which are better than others, but we're really talking about the franchises as a whole here. Okay, 20, Hannibal Lecter. Now, I didn't really know what to call this. Um, it's the Hannibal Lecter films, I think, are phenomenal. Manhunt and Silence of the Lambs. I think just those two alone are absolutely phenomenal. Um, I did like the remake, Red Dragon, and I have to say I haven't watched Hannibal, so I can't really comment on it. But really, I'm talking about across the board those three films that I mentioned there that I have seen. I enjoyed, especially the first two. I think are just phenomenal. I think Brian Cox is brilliant as Hannibal Lecter in the original film. Anthony Hopkins is fantastic in Silence of the Lambs, the sequel. Um, People forget about Brian Cox. He's a fellow countryman. He's from Scotland. But I think that just, especially Silence of the Lambs is a very important film because it was a horror film, essentially, and it won an Oscar. And that just doesn't happen normally. I think the reason the Academy voted for it in a lot of ways was because you could argue that it was a thriller, but really it's a horror film if you watch it. So it is a horror film. Okay, so that's number 20. Number 19, Die Hard. I love the Die Hard films. The fourth one was okay, but the original film, Die Hard, is just, if you want to take like the best action film of all time, by all means, you could take Die Hard. Um, and you could just put it up there because the original film is just phenomenal. Some of the best action scenes, just the whole setup, the whole idea of it. A lot of people criticise Die Hard 2. I actually really like it. And Die Hard 3, I think they tried something different and it really worked. I think the banter between Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Willis is phenomenal. I think maybe it falls apart a bit at the end, one adventure upon another sort of put on these two characters. But I think in the beginning, the first half of the film, it's really, really great. So yeah, that's the Die Hard films. The fourth one was okay. Uh, but the problem with the fourth one was that he was no longer John McClane. He was playing Bruce Willis post Sixth Sense rather than the wisecracking, uh, smart ass cop that he was in the other films. Okay, so that's number 19. Number 18, Harry Potter. Now, a lot of people might cringe at that, but I actually really like the Harry Potter franchise. And I think if you actually take it as well, one of the biggest franchises ever made, there was like 8 films, and the level of quality across the 8 is probably the best franchise in terms of maintaining the level of quality across all 8. I think if you're prejudiced against it, if you've not watched them, I wouldn't probably recommend going and watching the first film first. I'd probably recommend starting with maybe the third film, Prisoner of Azkaban. That's what I started with. Then went back, watched the previous two, and stayed with the series afterwards. Um, I think it's the type of film that I've absolutely loved as a kid, but as an adult, I could see why people loved it, and because of that, I could kind of really enjoy it as well. And I've read a couple of the books as well, which I really enjoyed. So I think that there's real magic in those Harry Potter films. Yeah, there's poorer ones. Some are better than others, but and there are criticisms to be had of the series. But on the whole, I think the level of quality throughout it was pretty incredible. Okay, so that was number 18. Number 17, Romero's Dead series. So we're talking, well, actually, I've only watched 4 of them, which would be Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and Land of the Dead. I haven't watched the other couple that he's made since then, but I think that Night of the Living Dead just such a phenomenal low budget horror film. He set, I mean, a lot of people think it's really original, but if you watch things like The Last Man on Earth, um, and there was another film before then, I can't remember the name of it, which I think that Romero borrowed from quite extensively. So I'm listening to my upstairs neighbour's dog bark. Um, so I think that yeah, Night of the Living Dead is just a phenomenal horror film. It does touch a nerve about segregation in America and about racism, even if the makers have said that they weren't intending that. That's certainly present in the film, in my mind. Dawn of the Dead, again, great social commentary about commercialism and about people's, just obsession with gain. Um, Dawn of the Dead, I think, is a phenomenal film as well. Day of the Dead is very, very underrated. It could have been better, but I think, I do really like that film. And I think Land of the Dead was okay. It was all right, but I think across the board, when you look at the zombie genre, the Romero films are just amazing, and really, help create an entire genre. Really. Okay, number 16. Can't read my own writing. That's good, isn't it? Okay, the Hammer Dracula films. I'm a big fan of these. I'm actually working on a documentary about them, about the Hammer Dracula films, and really, I just Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, and that whole time in Hammer Studios when Amicus were in operation as well at the same time in Britain, phenomenal movies that get released. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of, I can't remember how many Hammer Dracula films are. There's maybe seven. God, I can't remember how many there are, but they're certainly round about that. And I think there's another one after that which doesn't have Christopher Lee in it, but you could say is part of that series. The first three or four are brilliant. Even one that a lot of people don't talk about as much as The Brides of Dracula, which doesn't have Christopher Lee in it. Phenomenal. The atmosphere, and just the way they deal with the horror that they create. I mean, there's a real sexual tension in the films. But that being said, yeah, it's an absolute bastardization of Stoker's Dracula. There's no doubt about that. There's two of the films where they obviously, the first film and a later one, where they gave Lee more dialogue and tried to make him more like the character in the books. But it's not Bram Stoker's Dracula, but they are just still brilliant, brilliant films. Okay, so that's number 16. Number 15, Back to the Future. Now, Lawn Boy, I know you probably put that at number one, but for me, I've put it on at number 15. The Back to the Future series, I think, is fantastic. The original film is one of the best films of the 1980s. It's certainly within like science fiction, comedy, adventure films, it's right up there as well. I think the second and third film are very enjoyable, but I think there are problems with the two of them. I think the second one was rushed when they were making it. I think you can tell that when you're watching it. Some of the takes, even from the actors, aren't that strong. Robert Zemeckis himself has said that he was editing the second one while he was shooting the third one, and because of that, he feels like he would love to go back and re-edit Back to the Future too, which I would love to see. But that being said, I still really love the second and third one. A lot of people criticise the third one because it takes them to the West. Well, I'd actually have preferred if the second one had been another era as well, and just have them going on different adventures and different eras. That's what I would have liked to have watched. But anyway, I actually really like the third one. I think there's some great moments on it. This is a science experiment. You won't give me the Genesis device. No, it's a different film with Christopher Lloyd. The whole thing with the training in the third film, I think, is really great. And so overall, I really, Marty McFly, the DeLorean, Doc Brown, their adventures and just the whole series is iconic in terms of the 1980s and my childhood. So, I loved them. And Back to the Future, the first film is to blame for me becoming a musician. When I was 5 years old and the film came out, I got for Christmas a guitar and a skateboard. So there you go. Right. Number 14, Evil Dead. The Evil Dead trilogy, which is Evil Dead, Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn, and Army of Darkness, the medieval Dead. Bruce Campbell is one of those actors who was really ignored by Hollywood. They really missed the boat there because he would have been huge, massive. Um, he would have been, so charismatic, and really there should have been more Evil Dead films. I love them. The thing about the Evil Dead films that's quite funny is that they're not strictly sequels to one another. It's like they're alternative takes of the one universe. It's kind of weird. It's like the the first film is an out and out horror film, really. Although there are some things that are so ridiculous that you have to laugh at them. But from what the first film, especially for someone like me who's an aspiring filmmaker, the first film is right up there because what Sam Raimi and his friends did with regards to getting funding and just making a film guerrilla style was just wonderful. The use of sound, the effects that they put together for it, everything. I mean, it took them years, but totally worth it. The second film is more slapstick. The second one's by far the best of the series. In fact, it's one of the best horror films ever made. I agree with Eric Cohen of the Cinephiles about it. It's not frightening, the second one, but it's still a horror film because it deals with the undead and stuff like that. But it's such a funny film and great atmosphere. But the second one's weird because the first 20 minutes of it are like a recap of the first film, but they've changed what happened in the first film, so it's kind of weird that way. And in the third film, they did the same thing again. They had a recap, changed what happened at the end of the second film, so it's really strange what they did there. But a lot of people criticise the third one. Again, talking about the cinephiles, I know Ed Samuelson didn't really like the third one, thought it was too light. I can understand that, I can see it, but I still love the third one. I think it's an absolute hoot. It's kind of like Monty Python, but I really, really loved it. So that's the Evil Dead films at number 14. At number 13, we have Superman. Christopher Reeves as Superman was just phenomenal. Superman 4 broke my heart because it's such a poor movie, but the first two, the first one is a classic. As a kid, you always preferred the second one because he was fighting Zod and the other two, his henchmen. But I think as you get older and you watch the first one, you realise the first one is really by far the better film. The second film has a really checkered production history. In fact, there are two versions of it now, the Richard Donner version and the Richard Lester version, because Richard Donner was fired off of the set, and only recently did his version see the light of day. I will say Superman 3 is a good film. In fact, it's got my favourite bit of the entire franchise when Superman and Clark Kent fight one another. If you haven't seen it, that may sound strange. Superman and Clark Kent fight each other. Yeah, that does happen. The problem with Superman 3, it's a Richard Pryor vehicle. It's like a Richard Pryor comedy, and they squeezed Superman into the film. That's the problem with it. But apart from that, I really like Superman 3. Um, and we've got four great Superman films. We've got Superman 2, the Richard Lester version, Superman 3, which was also directed by Richard Lester, and we've got Superman 2, the Richard Donner version. Superman Returns, unfortunately, was a disappointment. But anyway, and Superman 4, we won't talk about that. So that's Superman at number 13. Christopher Reeves was just an absolute legend, and it was terrible what happened to him, and it was a real sad loss. Okay, number 12, Planet of the Apes. Planet of the Apes franchise is uh, probably one of the most famous franchises of all time. It has, up until recently, been sort of forgotten to a degree. Tim Burton tried to um, reinvigorate it and reboot it in the early, I think it was at 2001, something like that. But the original franchise, actually every film's got something to enjoy about it in the original franchise. I think the first two are fantastic. The original film, wonderful. I'm a big fan of the second one. Don't think it's as good as the first one, but I think the world is more interesting in the second one. It's more complicated, and there's an element of fear in the second one that isn't there in the first one. The third one is actually a lot of fun. It's got time travel in it. You might think it's silly, but it's actually a lot of fun, and it's got a real heartfelt conclusion to it. The fourth one is a very dark movie, but it is actually decent. Um, but the after that, it sort of gets a little bit, poorer. Um, so, but all in all, the Planet of the Apes franchise is great, and there's been the recent Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Rise of the Apes. Sorry, no, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. That's what it's called, isn't it? I haven't actually watched it yet, but I've heard great things about it, so I'll need to check that out. So that's Planet of the Apes at number 12. And at number 11, I've kind of cheated here. I've put Batman, right? But I've put both the Burton Batman films and the Nolan Batman films. The Burton Batman films, I think, are phenomenal. The original 1989 film is Bob Kane's Batman. This is where I look at it. Bob Kane's Batman, it's as much as people say that Nolan's version is closer to the character, actually it's not. If you have read the comics, the original run of comics, you will see Batman 1989 is very close in tone to what Bob Kane originally went for. And from that point of view, it is Bob Kane's Batman. Phenomenal score from Danny Elfman, great performances. Michael Keaton to this day, I think, is still defines that role in the same way that Sean Connery defined James Bond. Michael Keaton defined Batman, and I think he still gave. I mean, Christian Bale's great, but the voice and all that. Michael Keaton played him as a psychotic guy with a really sinister voice when he was at. It was almost like supernatural, and that was what Batman was about originally. And I think Michael Keaton just nailed that. The second film, a lot of people criticise, but I think it's a very clever film. It uses it actually uses the characters outside of Batman to explore the character of Batman. You've got Max Schreck, who's the billionaire, just like Bruce Wayne, but yet Bruce Wayne uses it for good. Max Schreck uses it for evil. You get the Penguin, who is an orphan, just like Bruce Wayne was an orphan, but the Penguin has went the other way with it and became bitter and twisted with it. Michael Keaton used it to do something proactive and positive. Catwoman is split down the middle, deals with this double life as Selena Kyle, the exact same thing as Batman. So I think that the film explores the Batman character through them. It's one of the most beautiful films ever shot. Batman Returns. It's a masterpiece, visual masterpiece. It's also got one of the greatest scores ever written, one of the most complex thematically, and it's just a phenomenal film. The Chris Nolan films, brilliant. I actually think The Dark Knight is the best Batman film. I think Batman Begins was a really great low key start to a franchise. I think they did the origin story wonderful. When I say that, but you've got Burton's Batman 1989 is more like Bob Kane's Batman. Then you've got Batman Returns, which is Tim Burton's Batman. It's as if he took Batman and put him into the same sort of world that Edward Scissorhands and people like that were in. Chris Nolan, really, the first film to me is Frank Miller's Batman. It's very similar to like Year One and the sort of 1980s Batman and on. The Dark Knight Returns and on within the comics. The Batman Begins is a phenomenal film, great performances, phenomenal soundtrack again, and just love that film. But The Dark Knight really is just incredible. It's a crime thriller. It's not doesn't feel like a superhero film. It feels like a crime thriller, and that's just phenomenal. It's Christian Bale was great in it, but Heath Ledger's fantastic. And the real unsung hero of that film is Gary Oldman. He is actually strings everything together in that film for me. Action scenes phenomenal. Christopher Nolan is just I think he's actually the director who's at his best at the moment. And I really look forward to The Dark Knight Rises because I love The Prestige and Inception. I think is one of the best films of the last 30 years. So here's hoping he gets The Dark Knight Rises right, and he will have created like the ultimate superhero trilogy. Okay, so that's us down to 11. Sorry, that took much longer than I thought. And in the next video, I will do the top 10. So again, what are your favourite movie franchises?